the researcher have made a mistake in any one of the steps in the sampling where the sample could not represent the whole population. Under probability sampling, here the researcher will involve all the population, all the individuals of the population into collection of information. First individual I am going to select randomly. So here I have selected 3. After that, on the basis of a regular interval, that is on the same interval, I am going to select the sample. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. My dear students, today we are in the 5th session of Unit 4 of the subject Business Research Method, and the Unit 4 is all about sampling and hypothesis testing. So already we have discussed few of the concepts. Let us quickly recall what we have discussed in a previous session. So in a previous session, I have covered this topic, that is a very important topic from sampling, that is types of sampling. So there are various types of sampling we have learnt, that is there are 2 main types of sampling, that is probability sampling as well as non-probability sampling, and we have seen what are the types that comes under probability sampling and what are the types that are included in the non-probability sampling. So it was a very important question, and my dear students, make sure that from the examination point of view, this is a very important topic for 15 marks, that is types of sampling, or they might ask for 10 marks also. Okay, go through this concept carefully. In today's session, we shall continue with a new topic, that is sampling error. So there may be a chances that the selection of sample may be wrong. In that situation, whatever the data or information which is collected by the researcher might also go wrong. So let us see what is this sampling error. So sampling error is a statistical error. Now what do you mean by error? Error in the sense mistakes. Suppose in selecting the sample, if the researcher makes any mistake, so it may be while deciding the population or might be deciding the sample or the sample unit. So the conditions may be anything. But while selecting the sample, the researcher has to be very careful. If he couldn't select the sample carefully, then whatever the information collected or the data which has been collected also goes wrong, so that it overall affects the research work of the researcher. Now what do I mean by sampling error? Sampling error is a statistical error or a statistical mistake. This type of error is occurred when the researcher does not choose. So I have told you, selection of a sample is not an easy task. Here the researcher have to be very careful while selecting the error. Suppose if the selection of the sample is wrong, then what happens? The overall research work will also become wrong, because we can't get the exact data or information what we want if we collect the or if we select the wrong sample. So this type of error is occurred when the researcher does not choose the sample that represents the entire population. Of course, we know while selecting the sample, that small number of individuals or the small unit of sample should represent the whole population, correct? So why do we go for sampling? Because we can't, or the researcher can't collect the information from a large group of people, that is from the whole population. In that situation, he will divide that whole population into certain groups and take some individual from that group and make a sample. So that is known as what? Sampling. Now, if the sample does not represent the whole population, now the main intention of sample is to represent the whole population, correct? So if the sample does not represent the whole population, then the whole research work goes wrong. So in other words, a sampling error occurs when the sample used in the study is not representative of the entire population. So I have told you, now suppose this is a whole population. Okay, so this is a whole population. Here the researcher can't collect the information. It may be due to several reasons. It may be due to time constraints or the amount of money what he has. So he can't collect the information from the whole population. In that situation, what he does, he takes some individual from the whole population and create a sample. So here this sample contains all type of people, that is all group of individuals. Now this sample will represent the whole population. Now what do you mean by sampling error? This sample is not able to represent the whole population, then it is called as what? Sampling error. In the sense, the researcher have made a mistake in any one of the steps in the sampling where the sample could not represent the whole population. Hope you are clear about sampling error. So sampling error means what? Here exact result cannot be ascertained. At the same time, that small size of sample will not represent the whole population. In that situation, whole research work goes wrong. So that is known as what? Sampling error. So it is difficult to expect the result from the sample that represents the indifferent qualities. Of course, we can't get exact result from the sample, but the researcher has to make sure that so we can get little bit of information or little bit of results from that sample which represents the whole population. The researcher should select the sample through observation, only then research results can be reliable. Of course, we have learnt in a previous session how to select a sample, what are the processes which are involved in the sample, correct? So here sampling is not an easy task. Here the researcher has to have sufficient knowledge, at the same time long duration or the time duration requirement is very high in order to select the sample. So time duration will be more in order to select the perfect sample. So the selection of the sample should be in such a way that it should represent the entire population. Now coming to the types of sampling error, let us see what are the mistakes that the researcher will do while selecting the sample. The following are the important types of sampling errors. So the first one is population specific error. So let us see what is this population specific error later. Time being, you remember there are 4 types of sampling error. So the first one is population specific error, second one is sample frame error, third one is selection error, and the fourth one is sample errors. So in these situations, our sample goes wrong or the selection of the sample goes wrong in these 4 situations. Now coming to the first one, population specific error. So in order to represent the whole population, how the researcher has to select the sample? So researcher have to study the population first, then select the sample. So that sample should be in such a way that it should represent the entire population. The population specific error occur when the researcher does not know precisely whom to survey. Now, if the researcher don't know who the population is or from whom the information has to be collected, in that situation, he randomly selects the sample where the sample is totally wrong. So here we can't select the sample randomly in certain situation depending upon the problem or the information what the researcher wants. So based on that, he has to select the sample. Suppose he don't know from whom he has to select the information or from whom he has to collect the information. In that situation, our sampling goes wrong. For example, a researcher wants to conduct a survey on cereal used for breakfast. So, he is conducting a survey where he wants to know that what are the cereals which are used for breakfast. Now, who is the target population? Of course, homemakers is a target population. Or the housewife who cook at home will be the target population. Suppose if the researcher select the student as a or a small child as a population, then of course sample size goes wrong. Correct? Here the selection of sample goes wrong if he selects the wrong population. Here by seeing the sentence itself, we'll come to know that the population is a homemaker. Suppose if the researcher select the husband of a particular woman or a husband of the women's, then what happens? The population goes wrong or the selection of the sample also goes wrong. So then the question arises as to what group of family members should be surveyed. So here the researcher knows that he wants to collect the information about the cereals which are used in the breakfast. Now he has to know from whom he has to collect. So whether it is from the grandparents of a particular home, or from the husband, or from the homemakers, or from the children, or from the grandchildren, here he has to be very careful while selecting the population. Should he consider the entire family? So, or he has to consider the entire family or mother or children. The mother can make a purchase decision. Now, as I told you, so who will or who is the target population? Mother or the homemaker will be the target population. The error of demographic description is thus a major flaw in sampling. In these situations, here the selection of the population also plays a very important role. So, suppose he has selected the children. So, children will not have any idea about the breakfast, what they are going to prepare, what the mother is going to prepare. In that situation, the target population goes wrong. So, here the researcher has to be very careful while selecting the population. So, population specific error in the sense what? The error which is made by the researcher while selecting the population. So, he has to know from whom the information has to be collected. Now, coming to the second one, sample frame error. Of course, we have identified who is the target population. Now, in order to contact them, so what are the various sources where we can contact that population? That is known as what? Sample frame error. That is how we can collect the information, how we will know about the information about the population. Sample frame errors occurs when an incorrect subpopulation is used to select a sample. Now here all the homemakers will not cook at home. So there also the researcher has to identify who are the homemakers who will permanently cook at home, who will have sufficient knowledge than the working women. Correct? So here he has to be very careful. Sampling frame errors occur when the population or the selection of subpopulation occurs. So here while selecting the subpopulation also the researcher has to be very careful. And I have told you how to contact that population, how to contact the target population. So in this example, how to contact the homemakers. So that also comes under sample frame error. So telephone directories are sometimes used as a basis for selecting the sample population. If the telephone user enter the wrong address, then sample also becomes error. Now what happens here? As I told you, how to contact the population, how to contact the homemakers. So normally the most used source is the telephone directories. Suppose the address which is given in the telephone directories is wrong, then there also occurs a sample error, that is sample frame error, where the researcher can't collect the information from the wrong address. Then the result available for research is also not reliable. Then he goes for a wrong address and collect from a wrong person. Then here also our research work goes wrong. Now coming to the third one, that is selection error. So this type of error occur when the respondents self-select their participation in the study. Now what happens? Here certain times researcher will select the population. So in certain situation, respondents self-select themselves. In that situation also a sample error occurs. That is selection errors. That is selecting or while selecting the sample itself error occurs. In this, only the interested will participate while obtaining the information from the respondents. This type of error can be controlled when a list of participating respondents is increased to sufficient numbers. And there are certain situations where the respondents or the researcher have selected the respondents and respondents are so ignorant to answer the questions. So here whatever the respondents which is selected by the researcher, so here the respondents themselves is not going to answer the question. In that situation also we can't get the sufficient information or data where selection error occurs. So pre-survey planning follow-ups and a neat as well as clean survey design will boost respondents' participation rate. That is, the main intention here is to encourage the respondents to give the information, or in order to increase their participation in the research work. So here mainly respondents plays a very important role, because researcher gets information or data from the respondents. If they are so ignorant to answer the questions, then what happens? We can't get the sufficient information. So researcher has to be very careful while selecting the population also. So first one was population error. In the sense, he has to be very careful from whom we have to collect. Next one is how to contact them. So if we contact them wrongly, then of course the information what we get also becomes wrong. Next one is selection error. That is, selecting the actual sample. So even though we have selected the respondent, but there are certain respondents who are so ignorant or who do not participate in the research work, there also research work will not be reliable. So this is about selection error. Now coming to the next one, sample errors. Now let us see what is the sample error. So, sample error occur due to disparity in the representativeness of the respondents. Now, what do you mean by sample error? So, I have already told you, samples should be in such a way that it should represent the entire population. Suppose the sample is not representing the entire population, then it leads to sample error. This type of error occurs when the researcher does not plan a sample carefully. So, if he has not selected the sample carefully, or that sample what he has selected does not represent the entire population, then it leads to sample error. So, these errors can be controlled and eliminated by creating a careful sample design having large enough sample. So, as I have already told you, if the sample size is more, then of course the accuracy of information will also be more. So, suppose the researcher has selected a wrong sample, so he has to make sure that, so he has to correct that sample, at the same time he has to enlarge the sample so that we can get the accurate result. So, having large enough sample to enable the participation by the entire population, or by applying online survey to collect the responses. So, there are 4 types of error already we have discussed. First one is population error, where the researcher have to be very careful to know from whom we have to collect the information, who is the target population. And the second one is sampling frame. So, we know who are the target population. Now, how to contact them, how to collect information from them, that is sampling frame. And the next one is selection error. Of course, we have selected a group of individual into a sample, but whether that sample or whether that individual are ready to participate in the sampling process, whether they are ready to give the information. So, that is known as what? Selection error. Next one is sample error. So, here the sample should be in such a way that it should represent the entire population. Suppose if the sample is not representing the entire population, then it leads to sample errors. So, these are the 4 types of errors in sampling. Now, coming to the next interesting topic, that is techniques of sampling. So, it is similar to your types of sampling. Now, what is this techniques of sampling? So, we have 2 types here. One is probability sampling as well as non-probability sampling. So, it comes under types of sampling itself. Now, what is this probability sampling? So, already we have discussed, under probability sampling, here the researcher will involve all the population, all the individuals of the population into collection of information. So, here each and every individual in the population will actively involve while collecting the information. That is known as what? Probability. So, in probability sampling, every element or every individual of the population has an equal chance of being selected. So, here whole population, suppose there are 10,000 people, there are 10,000 respondents in the population. So, all the 10,000 respondents have an equal opportunity to be selected. That is known as what? Probability sampling. So, probability sampling gives us the best chance to create a sample that is truly representative of the population. Now, here under probability sampling, we can get the accurate result because there are more number of individuals, or here the researcher is going to select the individuals from the entire population, and each and every individual of that population has an equal right to be selected or an equal chance to be selected. So here the accuracy will also be more under probability sampling. Now coming to the non-probability sampling, so it is opposite to probability sampling. So in non-probability sampling, all elements do not have an equal chance to be selected. Now here also what happens, they are going to take into consideration whole population, but what happens, all the individuals of that population do not have a right to be selected. So they will not have a chance to be selected. Whereas in probability sampling, they have an equal chance of being selected. But here they will not have an equal chance. So they do not have an equal chance to be selected. Consequently, there is a significant risk in ending up with non-representative sample which does not produce generalizable results. So what happens when compared to probability sampling, whatever the results which can be obtained from non-probability sampling is not accurate. So here the accuracy is more under probability sampling because each and every individual has an equal chance to be selected. Whereas under non-probability sampling, each and every individual does not have an equal chance to be selected, so that the accuracy of the information will also be less in non-probability sampling. Hope you are clear with two types of sampling here. One is probability, other one is non-probability sampling. Yes, we shall take an example here. For example, let's say our population consists of 20 individuals. So we have taken a small number where 20 individual is a total sample size. Each individual is numbered 1 to 20. So each individual is numbered 1 to 20 and is represented by a specific color, that is red, blue, green or yellow. Each person should have odds of 1 out of 20 of being chosen in probability sampling. Now, out of 20 members, any member or all the member has an equal chance to be selected. That is probability sampling. Non-probability sampling in the sense what? All in 20 individuals, all do not have a right to be selected or they do not get a chance to be selected. That is non-probability sampling. You can understand better if we go through the types of probability as well as non-probability sampling. So time being, you remember probability sampling in the sense what? If there are 20 individuals, all 20 individuals has an equal chance to be selected. Whereas under non-probability sampling, all the 20 individual does not have an equal chance to be selected. So that is known as non-probability sampling. Now coming to types of probability sampling, first one is simple random sampling. So already we have discussed all the types. Now we shall discuss in detail, that is in techniques of sampling. So the first one is simple random sampling. Now let us see what is this. This is a type of sampling technique you must have come across at some point. Here, every individual is chosen entirely by chance and each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Of course, we know about probability sampling. So, what does it mean? Each and every individual has an equal chance to be selected. Correct? So, under simple random sampling also, each and every individual, and simple random sampling is one of the type of probability sampling. So, here also all the individual has an equal chance to be selected. Simple random sampling reduces selection bias. Now, what do you mean by selection bias? There is no discrimination. That is, certain individual have not selected and certain individual have selected. So, there is no bias in such a matter because each and every individual has an equal chance to be selected. So, there is no selection bias. One big advantage of this technique is that it is the most direct method of probability sampling. So, it is one of the most direct method of probability sampling. Now, if you see the sample here, so there are 20 members, that is 20 individuals, and I have numbered from 1 to 20. Now, what do you mean by random sampling? So, randomly I can take few of the individuals. All the individuals have an equal chance to be selected. So, randomly I am going to take 2, 13, 18, 6 and 10. So randomly I am going to take. Now here all the 20 individuals or the 20 sample unit has an equal chance to be selected. So instead of 2 I can take 3 also. Instead of 3 I can take 4 also. So all the individuals in this particular random sampling has an equal chance to be selected. Okay, so that is known as what? Simple random sampling. Now coming to the next type, that is systematic sampling. Now let us see what is this systematic sampling. In this type of sampling, the first individual is selected randomly. So what happens here? Here also I am going to take 20 individual, and in this what happens? First individual is selected randomly and others are selected using a fixed sampling interval. Now what happens here? First individual among the 20 members, first individual I'll select randomly. Thereafter, I'll select on the basis of fixed interval. So, let's take a simple example to understand this. Say our population size is X. So, our population size is X. So, here I have taken it as 20 and we have selected a sample size of N. Then the next individual that will select would be X divided by N. So, first individual I'll select randomly. After that, I'm going to select on the basis of X divided by Nth. Okay, so Nth intervals away from the first individual, we can select the rest in the same way. So, let us take an example here. Suppose we begin with person number 3. So, 3 is selected randomly. So, I have taken 3 as randomly. So, there is no certain procedure here. So, 3 I have taken randomly and we want a sample size of 5. So, I want a sample size of 5. So, the next individual that will select would be at the interval of X divided by N. So, X divided by N. Now, X represents the population and N represents the sample size. Now, what is the total population? That is 20. Okay. And Nth. So, I want the Nth number, that is 5th number. So, this is 5th. So, 20 divided by N, that is, or 20 divided by 5, that is 4. So, first I have selected randomly, that is third one, and next I am going to take into consideration on the basis of X divided by Nth interval, that is 20 divided by 5, that is 4 from the third person. So, I am going to take the fourth person from the third person. So, after 3, I have selected 3 randomly. Next will be the fourth person. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. 7th person will be the next one. After that, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, 12th one will be the next person. So, like that. So, first one I have selected randomly 3. After that, I am going to take into 4. That is 20 divided by 5. That is 4. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. 7th will be the next person. Next, 1, 2, 3, 4. 11th one will be the next person. 1, 2, 3, 4. 15th will be the next person. 1, 2, 3, 4. 19th will be the next person. So, this is known as what? Systematic sampling. That is 3, 7, 11, 15 and 19 will be the sampling. So, this is known as what? Systematic sampling. So, systematic sampling in the sense what? First individual I am going to select randomly. So, here I have selected 3. After that, on the basis of a regular interval, that is on the same interval, I am going to select the sample. So, this is known as systematic sampling. Now, coming to the next type, that is stratified sampling. Now, let us see what is this stratified sampling. In this type of sampling, we divide the population into subgroups. So, this subgroup is called as what? Strata. So, it is called as what? Stratified sampling. So, in this type of sampling, we divide the population, that is the population of 20 members into subgroups called as strata, based on different traits like gender, category, etc. and then we select the sample from these subgroups. Now, what I am going to do, in the whole 20 population, there are variety of characteristics of individual. Now, I am going to make a subgroup depending upon their characteristics. So, here I have taken the colors, or in the whole population, I can take based on gender, that is, or on the caste or on the religion. So, like that, I can divide into subgroups. And those subgroups are called as what? Strata. Here, we first divided our population. So let us see here. That is, we use this type of sampling when we want the representation from all the subgroups of the population. However, stratified sampling requires proper knowledge of the characteristics of the population. Now, in order to do this stratified sampling, I have to know all the information of the 20 individuals, that is from the whole population. So, I have to know the information of whole population, then I have to divide into subgroups. Now, let us see how we have divided. Here first, we have divided our population into subgroups, which is called as strata, based on different colors. Now, as I have told you, I have given 20 individuals into different colors and I am going to divide depending upon their colors, that is red, yellow, green and blue. Then from each color we select an individual in the proportion of their members in the population. Now, as I told you, stratified sampling means what? We are going to divide according to their characteristics. So here I have taken the color. So depending upon the color I am going to divide. Now all the red I am going to make into one group, that is 1, 7, 13 and 15. So this is a red group. Next all yellow 2, 5, 12 and 19. Next all green 3, 4, 10, 18 and 20. Next all blue 6, 8, 9, 11, 14, 16 and 17. Now among these groups I am going to select one from each of the group, or I am going to select from those subgroups depending upon their population. Now, from these subgroups, I am going to take individual depending upon the proportion. So, from red, I have taken 7 and from yellow, I have taken 5. Next, from green, I have taken 10 and in blue, there are more number of individuals. So, I have taken 2 members, that is 9 as well as 16. So, this is known as what? Stratified sampling. Now, what you have to remember, under stratified sampling, depending upon their characteristics, we are making into groups or subgroups. That is known as what? Strata. Now here the whole population. So here I have taken the color. So depending upon the color, I have made into groups, which is known as what? Strata. And among the groups, I am going to select the sample. So it always depends upon the proportion on which I have selected. So here red, yellow and green has a less number of individuals. So I have taken one from each, whereas from blue there are more number of individuals. So I have taken 2 members. So this is known as what? Stratified sampling. Next one is clustered sampling. So in a clustered sampling, we use the subgroups of the population as a sampling unit. Here also, we are going to take into consideration subgroups, but not on the characteristics. Randomly, I am going to make the subgroups. So sampling unit rather than individuals, the population is divided into subgroups known as clusters. So here also I am going to make the subgroups which is known as clusters. Whereas in stratified sampling I am going to make the subgroups which is called as strata. Here it is called as what? Clusters, and a whole cluster is randomly selected to be included in the study. Now what happens? What is the difference between stratified sampling as well as cluster sampling? Under stratified sampling, depending upon the characteristics from the whole population, I am going to make the subgroups, and from each subgroup, I am going to take the individuals. Whereas here what happens? I am going to group not depending upon the characteristics. Randomly, I am going to make all the groups, and from the group, I am going to select any one of the group. That is, any one of the whole group itself will be the sample. Whereas there, I am going to take from the subgroup itself, I am going to take individually. Correct? So, if you see the example here, so here I have made into subgroup, and from each subgroups, I am going to take individuals separately. That is known as what? Sample here. Whereas here, I am going to divide the whole population into subgroups, which is called as clusters, and whole subgroup itself will become the population. Now, if you see the example, in the above example, we have divided our population into 5 clusters. So, if you see here, it is 5 clusters, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 clusters. Each cluster consists of 4 individuals and we have taken the 4th cluster. So, we have taken this 4th cluster. Okay. So, randomly we have taken this 4th whole cluster as a sample. Now, our sample is how much? 13, 14, 15 and 16 will be the sample. I am going to take the whole cluster itself. That is known as what? Cluster sampling. So, we can include more cluster as per our sample size. This type of sampling is used to focus, or this type of sampling is used when we focus on a specific region or area. So, this is not depending on the characteristics. So, we are going to make into subgroups and the whole subgroup itself will become the sample. So, here 4th cluster is taken as a sample. So, 4th cluster is 13, 14, 15 and 16. So, here there is no characteristics, nothing. So, randomly we are going to take one of the cluster itself. So, this normally applies in cases of selecting a particular region. So, hope you are clear with cluster sampling. Now, coming to the types of non-probability sampling. So, till now we have discussed all the types of probability sampling. Now, coming to non-probability sampling, first we have convenience sampling. So, this is perhaps the easiest method of sampling because individuals are selected based on their availability as well as willingness to take part. Now, what do you mean by non-probability sampling? So, here each and every individual does not have an equal chance to be selected. Correct? So, here convenience in the sense what? Depending upon the convenience, they are going to select randomly. So, it is based on the availability as well as willingness to take part. Here, let's say individual number 4, 7, 12, 15 and 20 want to be a part of our sample and hence we will include them in the sample. Now, what do you mean by that? So, here the researcher felt that among the 20 individuals, so only these 5 will help us to get the information. So, it depends upon the convenience of the researcher. So, he thought that 4, 7, 12, 15 and 20 will give us sufficient information. So, depending upon the convenience, he has randomly selected them. So, that is known as what? Convenience sampling. So, it always depends upon the willingness of the researcher. Convenience sampling is prone to significant bias because the sample may not be a representation of the specific characteristics such as religion or say the gender of the population. So, here there occurs a sample bias because the researcher will select the sample according to his convenience. So, there always be a sampling bias. So, this is known as what? Convenience sampling. Next one is quota sampling. In this type of sampling, we choose items based on predetermined characteristics of the population. So, here we are going to take into consideration predetermined characteristics. So, depending upon the characteristics, we are going to select. Consider that we have to select individual having the multiples of 4 for our samples. Now, here I have told you quota sampling means what? Depending upon a predetermined characteristics, we are going to select the sample. Now, here we have taken the multiples of 4, that is 4, 8, 12, 16 and 20. So, this is a predetermined characteristic because it is a multiples of 4, correct? So, this is known as what? Quota sampling. Therefore, the individual numbered 4, 8, 12, 16 and 20 are already reserved for a sample. In quota sampling, the chosen sample might not be the best representation of the characteristics of the population that we aren't considered. So, whatever the sample what we are selected, we can't tell that it will give us exact result, but depending upon a certain predetermined characteristics, so from the whole population, we are going to consider the sample. So, here we have taken the multiples of 4 as a sample. Now, coming to the next one, that is judgment sampling. So, it is also known as selective sampling. So, here the researcher is going to judge or going to select a particular sample. So, it is also known as selective sampling. It depends upon the judgment of the experts when choosing whom to ask the question. So, here or whom to ask or who will participate, from them he is or the researcher is going to judge or the expert is going to judge, and from them the information will be collected. Suppose our experts believe that people numbered 1, 7, 10, 15 and 19. So 1, 7, 15. So 1, 7, 10, 15 and 19. So these will give the sufficient information. So here the experts or the researcher themselves have judged that from the whole population of 20, only this much individual will help us to give the information. So they have made their judgment and they have selected the sample. That is known as what? Judgmental sampling. Suppose our experts believe that people numbered 1, 7, 10, 15 and 19 should be considered for our sample, and they may help us to infer the population in a better way. As you can imagine, quota sampling is also prone to bias by the experts and may not necessarily be representative. So under non-probability sampling, so under all the types, we can't tell that, now we can't tell that all the 5 individuals of this whole population can represent the whole population, correct? So here there is always a sample bias or the population bias, because while selecting the sample, the researcher has to be very careful. Here under judgmental sampling, what they have done, on their own judgment, they have thought that these 5 individuals will give us or help us to get the information. So they have selected randomly. Next one is snowball sampling. So this is also one of the important sampling method. So I quite like this sampling technique. Existing people are asked to nominate further people known to them so that the sampling increases in size like a rolling snowball. Now if you will better understand if I show the example here. Now quota sampling means what? I am randomly asking an individual to give me some information. So after giving the information, he will refer some other person, and that person will refer some other person to get the information. So he will give the information how much he knows, then for more information he will refer some other person whom he knows well. So here it rolls on like that. So it is known as what? Snowball sampling. This method of sampling is effective when the sampling frame is difficult to identify. So what do you mean by sampling frame? That is how to contact the population or how to contact the individuals in a population, correct? Now if we don't know the sampling frame properly, that is if we don't know from whom we have to collect or how we have to collect the information, in that situation a person referring other person will help in this type of sampling method. Here we had randomly chosen person 1 for our sample, and then he or she recommend person 6 and person 6 recommend person 11 and so on. So here what happens? Now here randomly we have selected the first person. Now here what he does, he gives some information, then he recommend number 6. He recommend number 6 to give the information. Next number 6 have given 11 or recommended 11 to get the information. Next 11 have recommended 14 and 14 have recommended 19. Like this, the sample goes on increasing in a rolling manner. So it is known as what? Snowball sampling. So there is a significant risk of selection bias in snowball sampling, or referred individual will share the common traits with the person who recommended them. Now what they will do, what happens if they know the information? Suppose if we have selected this person wrongly, then what happens? All the person whom he recommends also becomes wrong. So here selection has to be very careful. Now this 1 have recommended 6, 6 have recommended 11, 11 have recommended 14 and 14 have recommended 19. So it is like a rolling method and it is called as what? Snowball sampling. And this is suitable when we don't know the exact sampling frame. In that situation, this method is very suitable. Hope you are clear with all the methods here. So these are known as what techniques of sampling, or you can also write it as types of sampling. So we have mainly two types, probability as well as non-probability sampling, and under probability sampling there are various types, and under non-probability sampling there are various types. So we have discussed in detail each and every type of both probability as well as non-probability sampling. So it is better to understand with the diagrams. So if we take the diagrams like this, it will be easy for you to understand. So in my next session, I am going to discuss the topic, that is hypothesis. So this unit is all related to sampling as well as hypothesis, correct? So till now we have discussed everything related to sampling. So in my next session, I am going to discuss about hypothesis. Let us see what is this hypothesis in research. So my dear students, hope you have understood today's session clearly. See you all in my next session with a new topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.